Hey everybody, this is Adam Braus.
This is Scott Maupin.
And this is Solutions from the Multiverse.
Welcome. Today we have a special guest with us.
How special is he?
Coming in hot.
We're about to find out, right?
Straight from, where are you hailing from right now, Dan?
I am one of those digital nomads at the moment.
So cool.
So I fly by night, I swim by day, and in the afternoons I take a tea.
Kind of a triathlete sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is Dan Morse, everybody. Dan Morse is a lot of things, polymath of kinds.
Ooh.
But he's going to talk to us about his solution, which we're super down to hear. Should we go straight into it? Is that enough introduction? Is that good?
It could be. Yeah, light? I think I give the green light.
Okay.
Yes, I give my blessing.
Dan, just shoot straight into it. What's the solution? And then we'll talk about it.
The solution is called Social Prescribing, and it's doctors prescribing community activity, such as arts, nature, volunteering, things that are already happening in a neighborhood close to a local clinic.
Social prescribing. Okay. I'm going to need more explanation because I don't know that I have my head wrapped around it quite yet.
So imagine that you are a patient.
Mm-hmm.
You go into the doctor and you are moderately anxious or depressed or lonely.
Okay.
And you tell the doctor that. And what will the doctor do typically?
SSRIs.
They'll give you drugs, tell you to go to therapy.
Right.
Well, it turns out in the UK, they started realizing that there are other alternatives. And they basically interview people and say, what are your interests? And they'll connect you to a local group. So there might be a local nature walk that happens Mondays at 4. There might be a community garden. There might be a volunteering opportunity to serve food at a soup kitchen. There might be a local arts group that gets together. And the idea is that all these things over the past 5 years have growing evidence bases on their positive impacts on health. So that is kind of converging with a loneliness epidemic that research is showing has, if you have severe loneliness, the impacts on your health.
Listen up, Scott.
I'm taking notes right now. Furiously writing.
The impacts. We can talk after, Scott.
Oh, please, thank you.
You have a new friend. I know the secret.
Yes, I'm up to 7.
But anyways, some research came out by Julianne Holt-Lunstad that being lonely, if you're kind of chronically lonely for a long period of time, it can be a health impact, mortality impact, akin to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow, and you don't even get to look nearly as cool as smoking 15 cigarettes.
But you smell better.
That's true, and you're kissable. You're very kissable.
Yeah.
But also imagine if you smoke 15 cigarettes by yourself alone every day, that you're doubling it up. That's terrible.
You're like a philosopher.
Read the study. You'll see the different variations.
You're like Jean-Paul Sartre. If you
I'm not. This is not moving in the direction of health. I'm moving.
Oh, I see. So you're saying double the impact. Be lonely and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, get the real.
Then you really are like Jean-Paul Sartre. Didn't he say, "Hell is other people"? That's a famous Sartre quote.
I don't know.
Yeah, French existentialist philosopher. So there's a loneliness epidemic. What does that mean?
The Surgeon General in 2019, actually before COVID, his name is Vivek Murthy. He did a tour around the states in, must have been 2016, when the opioid crisis was really kind of at its peak. It's been tons of research about it. It's been on the news. Most people kind of are familiar with it. The sort of secondary thought about it that came from his research that didn't get as much publicity is that when he looked at like the people who were taking opioids and kind of bounced back and the people who didn't, there's kind of a common thread that is sort of untangible of like, these people had somewhat destitute lives. Like they weren't very connected to community. And the more research is coming out that people feel more disconnected, people feel more lonely, it's becoming something that's in the national forefront, and the research is also coming out about the health impacts. So it's actually a priority of the Surgeon General now to address loneliness. And I think the pandemic accelerated this. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, one of the things that caught my attention on social prescribing is that the intervention was really invented and popularized in the UK in around 2018 and spread. And within 3 years later, it became national policy. So you can go to any clinic and see a general practitioner. And if you are feeling this, they'll connect you to what's called a link worker, who's the person who kind of gives you the social prescription. So I was so blown away by how fast.
Yeah.
3 years. That's unprecedented.
I mean, that's got to mean it for something to move that fast through government. That means they've got to be seeing some real signs of success, like strong everywhere.
There's signs of success. I think the signs of success, a lot of it actually is evidence-based, but actually what drove it is that it was more of a grassroots movement. The idea caught on and the clinics started doing it, and it was already happening, and it was more of like the government playing catch-up and saying, let's provide some national infrastructure. Part of it too is like, I'm so fascinated by how movements happen and how change happens. In the UK, actually, part of it was cultural, because crazy story, there was this young member of parliament who kind of like an ACO figure, not necessarily like radical in one way. AOC, yeah. Who her whole thing was loneliness, and she was like 32, cool, and she was doing it. It was kind of like somewhat of an interesting topic. But then she actually was murdered.
Oh my God.
And it became this huge like commemorance of her life. And so I think that actually influenced it too.
So there was kind of in memoriam newspaper articles, and then her political issue was loneliness.
Yes.
So she
did the huge survey in the UK that really revealed it.
So here in America, it was like this Surgeon General thing kind of made that become a little more popular. There they had a whole member of their parliament.
They also have an issue of, a part of it is structural too, because in the UK there's universal health care.
Right.
So everyone can do it.
Right.
And remember when Obamacare was being passed, there's all these old people like, I don't want to have to wait, 3 months to get an appointment,
Right, sure.
And so there's overcrowding in the areas, and they found that 60% of people go to the doctor for a non-medical issue.
Oh, great. So this is almost like in the realm of preventative care.
Preventative care, addressing social determinants of health.
Social determinants of health. Ooh, dang, that jargon. It's just like, I just could curl up with that. Do you have any more jargon? You could never. Okay, we'll try to get more jargon in.
Dan, you got to earn it.
I just love it. Yeah.
You got to earn it.
Okay. Okay.
As I hear about this, it's reminding me in ways about like the famous rat experiment where they had a rat in a cage and they gave them the choice to hit the heroin button or the not heroin or whatever, and they would hit it over and over again. They were like, "See, addictive rats," and then somebody noticed the cage is terrible. Of course, that's the only thing that they can do, and they gave them a much nicer cage. And they found way different results.
Not just a nicer cage, a rat paradise.
Oh, you know more about this.
Yeah, they created a rat paradise. It had all these other rats, and it had like all these tubes and colors and like rat games they could play. And
like a fulfilling environment,
right?
Which is what it sounds like you're describing.
It's basically Chuck E. Cheese, but not for humans.
Right, and you don't have
back to its roots of rodents.
Yes.
The rodent roots of Chuck E. Cheese, of course.
Yes.
In a rodent Chuck E. Cheese, there's a small human.
The V1.
A small human, a robotic human
that plays
that
guitar,
sings and dances in front of. They love it.
Animatronic rock bands really kind of was like just the Chuck E. Cheese thing. Why don't we have more of those?
I don't know.
I enjoyed it. Didn't you?
Unanswerable questions. I totally did. Of course. I feel like that technology probably got diverted into.
I just gave away
like
next
military
week's solution from the multiverse. Animatronic rock bands. Yeah, that was going to be next week's.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you bring up that study, because that study itself is sort of a cause and effect thing, right? That's all what science is. What's the variable we're manipulating? How does that influence someone's outcome? What's interesting about social interactions is that it's not like you take a pill and it has this very predictable chemical impact on your body. If you involve someone in social activity and let's say they're depressed, they might go to a social event, and then they might get invited to make a friend, get invited to work out with them, or they might now get involved with an activity that's purposeful for them.
You're saying these things are compounding.
Yes.
So they if you give them a pill, they just take a pill, and in some ways you just get more dependent on that pill, and it doesn't necessarily unlock things in your life potentially, right? Might just be kind of keeping you off the edge or something. But with this, you go and you volunteer or you go and you work at a community garden, all of a sudden you're in a garden, you're going to get fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, and that's nice because then that aids your health as well. You're getting exercise. Also, you're socializing. Is it more about the sort of socializing aspect, or is it more about the kind of getting out of your house and like on your feet and moving around like physically?
It's those, but I'd say that it's something more central, which is giving you a greater sense of agency and control over your health. Because when we went to school, and we learned about health, it was like eat, it's exercise, diet, sleep. But there really are these new emerging categories of being purposeful, engaging in creative work, giving. The research on volunteering actually shows that people who volunteer, their health improves more so than the person receiving the volunteering, which is kind of profound. It's like it answers the question, yes, it is good for you to be altruistic. And so when you look at all these different activities, they affect other people too. Like if people are volunteering, that affects others in the community. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about social prescribing at scale, like imagine if it's across the states, there's now 10 million more people volunteering. Imagine how that changes. That could bridge political divide. That could bridge social divides. That could create more civic activism.
Oh yeah.
And so like there's really strong ripple effects from this sort of stuff.
So help me understand, what would this look like if I'm feeling lonely and I go in to see a doctor and I'm
either hypothetical or real.
Right, hypothetical. Another person who's not definitely me. But if I go in to see a doctor,
I'm peeing all the time. Like I'm literally peeing like 14 times a day. Just someone else, hypothetically. What would he tell me? What would you tell me if I told you that I was doing that?
No, but if I go in and I say, "Hey, I'm feeling lonely. I'm not open to medication right now," but what type of is the doctor going to prescribe?
So
what does that look like?
I'll give an example. So yeah. I'll give an example of how it works in the UK. So you'd go, you'd be checking in. You might say, my best friend moved away, so it's been a transition, or my mom, whatever the changes. If they kind of get a sense of moderately anxious, depressed, or lonely, the doctor will then say, hey, well, there's this thing that we're doing that's kind of like a supplement to traditional healthcare, which is called social prescribing. So in the UK, they connect you to someone different than the doctor, because the doctor only has like 10 minutes with each patient.
Right.
They're called a link worker, kind of like a community health worker. And this person will interview you on your interests. So they'll know, Scott, you like comedy. They'll know, Scott, you like boogie boarding. Of course, I know that's
absolutely
a big interest. Yep.
Just boogieing too.
Just boogie.
You could tell.
Yeah, anything involving a boogie. And they would then have a menu of let's say 100 different community activities. Right. Things that happen regularly, things that are already existing, not necessarily the clinic's putting on. And they would know you like boogie boarding, you like comedy, and they'd suggest you connect with one of these places. And so, that's like signposting to different things, but also a lot of it too can be coaching you, because if you're lonely, you're more reticent to engage socially. And a lot of the coaching is to help you grow a sense of agency and confidence to do it. And they might text you before, text you after. So I think what's exciting about this stuff is that we have more tools in our toolkit than we realize. So it's not just the prescription, but it's changing the way we're thinking about health.
Yeah.
And thinking about, if I'm depressed, maybe I just don't do Netflix or exercise. Let me try these other things, because there's new evidence to support it creating health.
And you're like circumventing the whole, you're like, instead of attacking the symptoms or treating just the symptoms, we're trying to go back to the source or whatever to kind of really change your environment and make it more to just kind of erase the whole problem.
Rat paradise.
That's
the goal.
They should call it that. I'm sure it'll be very popular.
The name?
Rat paradise for humans.
Yeah. One thing that seems to me really provocative about this idea on a more almost philosophical level is that, especially American society, but Western society in general, Western philosophy is very individualistic, right? If you think of kind of Descartes as the kind of premier Western philosopher, he talks about cogito ergo ego sum, right? Yeah, those are all first person singular, right? I think, therefore I am. And that's kind of like a fundamental Western philosophical idea. Not a very good one, but it's very common. It's sort of the baseline. But if you go back way further to like an Aristotle figure, his whole premise was that human beings are social animals. He says it all the time. Social animal. He says it once in the Politics at a very important time. He says it very loud. Maybe he doesn't say it a lot of times. But he asks, what animal is the most social animal? The bee, the ant. Clearly, he says it is the human because they have speech. That's what he says. And so this almost is like I don't want to, say it's socialist because it's not socialist. It's just healthcare. I mean, you can do it. It doesn't matter who's paying. You're not saying who pays for it. You're just saying it's an intervention. But the intervention itself is admitting to our social natures as people instead of just focusing on, well, you've got to get your SUV and your single family, home and you've got to consume these things or take this pill because you. It's like, no, actually, you're kind of part of this larger tapestry. And the more you engage in that and the better, you will actually be healthier. You'll be a better sort of node in the network.
Yeah, I think, and like identifying that we're dealing with like a net that people fall through sometimes. And if we can make that net stronger, make those holes smaller, then fewer people fall through. And this is an easy way that kind of just strengthens everywhere across the board. Like, I think even if I wasn't feeling like especially lonely, this sounds like an exciting, I was like, oh man, give me a link worker. I would love to find a way to have someone who would figure out how to engage my interests and my skills and what I could contribute to like the needs and the spots where I could do that.
I think something that's really cool about it too is if, you're talking about a lot of different sectors of society. We're actually hosting a conference with the Harvard Design School at the Public Health School in October. And we were writing the invite and we're like inviting 20 people, kind of a small kind of kickoff, a lot of the movers and shakers in the
Not
space.
after this podcast comes out.
26 people.
You're going to get the SFTM bump.
And we were counting, and there's like, I think we counted like 9 sectors of society who are involved in this, from research, arts, local government, healthcare,
Meetup.com
insurance.
was there too.
Yeah. Meetup.com is actually doing research. So this is more than social prescribing. This is our next chapter of health. Because if you look back at the history of healthcare, it's interesting. We think about health as like, okay, this is the research, this is what it is, but it's actually constantly evolving. Because modern healthcare really only was birthed in the late 1800s at Johns Hopkins, where they took the European research model, where you're teaching and you're doing experiments and lab work, and you're kind of using scientific method to rigorously do it. Before, it was like a kind of a mom and pop sort of trade, and then public health was only invented in 1910 after like people researched an outbreak of a disease in New Orleans. And then you look at like a lot of the health and diet kick has really only happened in the 60s, 70s. Therapy really took off in the 70s. I think within our lifetimes, meditation and mindfulness and mental health has become a huge boom. And so it's you look at the back of history, it's naive to think like, okay, we did it. Yay, we're finished. Like we figured it all out. And when it comes to social health, that's the term, social health.
Oh, wow.
It's really hard to research for the reasons that we were talking about before. But the research is it's kind of the precipice. It's like the cutting edge of stuff that we're doing because there's so many variables involved. And I think it's really, really exciting. So, when I think about this work, it's kind of, because there's so many people involved, I like to say that it's like a societal symphony doing this stuff. Because I can say, like, I'll give you an example. Like I was like, I got a hook at Cleveland Clinic. I kind of gotten in there. And so we actually have a pilot project happening in the geriatrics department. There's 17 geriatricians. And it's funny because it's so easy to give someone a pill. It's like you put an order with Merck and then they ship it. And then like, there's 3 things you got to think about. Like how much, how often, and then like what are the symptoms? But like it's so hard to implement social prescribing. Yeah. So I'm in like this little car that I rented from the airport, and I'm driving around to like the local volunteering commission.
It's a full-size car though. It's not just like a toy car. Like a clown car.
It wasn't a clown car. I mean, that would be a little
his doctor prescribed that he needed to drive in a little tiny clown car.
Automobile prescribing.
Really insensitive.
This is the idea we're talking about.
We prefer carnival car. Actually,
not carny car. Okay.
There were a surprisingly large number of people in that car. You would not believe how many people.
I mean, it's part of the act. It's part of the act.
That's a bit.
So you drove to Cleveland Clinic.
So I'm in Cleveland, and I met up with people at the Parks Department. I met up with people at the Volunteering Commission who run AmeriCorps. I met up with people in like the local foundation. We've talked to health insurers. So it's what's crazy is that you're channeling people between these already existing assets that the people aren't making use of. And what's crazy about social prescribing that I think is really could bring a new chapter to the way that honestly our society functions is that, you know, there's incentives that aren't being like taken advantage of, because the Parks Department would like to say we doubled the amount of people who come to our parks. The arts industry is very interested in social prescribing because if arts is seen as a way to create health, which the research is showing, then artists could have newfound work at hospitals. And so there's something really special and powerful about this, that like the more this happens, the more that these organizations kind of send people to each other. The metrics of one person's success is the metrics of success for others. So in New York City, there's a program for nature prescriptions for folks with dementia. And the Parks Department's considering like maybe we should staff someone on our team on social prescribing because we have accessibility goals and social prescribing could meet that. So I think it's just really exciting thinking about how we're really at the precipice not only of health research, but also like the way society interacts and collaborates and is structured.
It's like civil society coming together. I mean, that's really what it is, right? That's largely civil society.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, in the UK, they have a nationalized healthcare system. So if it gets implemented, it's everywhere at once. Now I'm jealous and I want this here, but what's the next steps to doing it in our system here in the United States? What does that look like here?
So there's basically a thing like the Army, but you sign up and you join this movement. You give away 3 years. I'm just kidding.
Oh. I was ready to go. I was like, here's my pen. Let's do it. I would be way too kidnappable. Someone's just like, oh, we just need 3 years of your life. I'm like, okay, just tell me what it's for later.
This windowless van.
As long as I find out in the first couple months, that's fine. Whatever.
So you're asking a classic SFTM question. How do we get it done? Like, how would you do?
Yeah, how would we get this? Now that you've made me want it, how do I get it?
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? We need the research to get healthcare to kind of be on board, but we need adoption to get the research. The other thing is that you need to have awareness and public interest can drive policy, like it happened in the UK with the PM passing away. And also public interest can drive the evidence because we've seen, climate change trends politically, and then the NIH is funding a ton of stuff, right? So, it kind of starts with a chicken and egg problem. And this is something that I was thinking about. And basically what we did, like you can imagine it's like a chicken and egg. It's like a triangle, all three of these things, evidence, adoption, public interest. They're all like pointing to each other and saying like, we need this for this. But I think what's really in the center is bringing together a community of people and who have hands in all these different things, who can build buzz and get excitement. So
you need like a poster child, like a California roll. You guys know the history of sushi? The history of sushi. So 50 years ago, nobody ate sushi except for in America, except for, recent Japanese immigrants. That was it. That was the only people. Yeah. 50 years ago.
Well,
were you alive?
No.
But anyway, so nobody was eating sushi, like except for these American Japanese immigrants who had it from their, culture from coming from Japan. But everybody else, Latinos, white people and stuff, they didn't eat sushi. And now everybody eats sushi. Everybody does, really, right? So how did it happen? Well, it turns out the way someone in California, I don't know who, but someone was like, we need to make it so there's a consumable form of sushi that like non-Japanese immigrants will eat. Like just run-of-the-mill, European people eat. So they made the California roll, and it was engineered specifically to not be like scary. So they put the rice on the outside to cover the seaweed because the seaweed kind of freaked people out. And then they put on the inside, they put artificial crab meat and sour cream and avocado.
It was sour cream originally.
Yeah, sour cream, I think. Yeah, sour cream, crab meat, and avocado, which are like Californian, people will eat that because it just sounds like normal, whatever, food. And so the whole idea of like raw fish was like out of the picture, and there's not even seaweed because it's like covered up. And then they started selling a lot of California rolls that people started to eat because it was this hip thing and it was supposed to be healthy and kind of cultural or whatever. multicultural. And then they people got used to that. Then they're like, well, what else do you have behind the counter? So then people got interested more and more. And then finally they were eating like raw sashimi, fatty tuna, with whatever super seaweed, whatever stuff. So yeah, we might need a California roll for social prescribing.
We need a gateway sushi.
A gateway sushi.
That opens the door. Well, it sounds like you've got programs starting up in different spots, and then those will generate data that then...
Those are the California rolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that... I mean, are you working... You would have to work with different giant insurance companies or with medical... I don't know the medical landscape well enough.
Yeah, so we kind of see ourselves as a catalyst, sort of. I was working on. We're launching a newsletter, and I'm kind of calling it like the Social Prescribing Town Square, where there's lots of people who are trying to implement this. Let's have it be the place where ideas are shared, where we have a monthly gathering, where, all the lessons learned. But a lot of it is like we're trying to start a grassroots movement like in the UK. And so there's a group of 35 therapists in Utah who are working to implement it. There's implementation projects in Cleveland, like I mentioned. There's one that's going to be sprouting up in the East Bay here. There is a really impressive project called by the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Where they are giving free museum passes, and they call it culture as a prescription.
Yes, I love that.
There's an incredible person, Ann Basting, who's a professor at University of Minnesota, who has just it's obvious when you hear it, but it's absolutely brilliant. She has a program called Time Slips, where they go into memory homes, but basically, when you're working with people who have Alzheimer's, it's really distressing, especially for the families of these people, because like they're forgotten, But what they do is she engages these people she puts on plays with the people who have Alzheimer's being in it. And so the whole philosophy is let's use art as a means of connection, and let's not get so rooted in the past because time slips away.
Yeah, time slips away.
And you see, it's kind of amazing what happens because people's cognition starts getting stimulated, and sometimes people actually like more life comes into them than they had.
Can I rewind a little bit to
of course.
Like the medical intervention side of it? Like if you go in and you say, I have depression, or I feel blue, or so loneliness. Those are all like kind of the symptoms of like the worried well. You don't have a severe mental illness. You're not like suicidal ideation or something. But what about if you go in and you're like, I have really bad headaches, and then your doctor's like, tell me about your day-to-day life. And then without you really realizing it, you're like, well, I'm alone all day, and I have these sort of, and actually the comorbidity is actually the headaches, and actually what the real source of the problem is might be this kind of loneliness or sort of lack of social interaction. Will the doctor say, chronic headaches, prescription, social prescribing? Like, can they prescribe it for not just kind of the symptoms of the worried well? Can they also prescribe it for like back pain or, something that's related?
It's a great question. And I think there's something really important philosophically about social prescribing that I think will back into your question. So I'll back into that. We're gonna kind of do like, you like boogieing, we're gonna do like a backwards walk.
Take that little clown car and turn it around.
So I think Western medicine is super, super top down. The doctor is the authority. The doctor tells you what to do. The doctor has your solutions. But the thing about and that works if you're just like dealing with bodies, literal bodies. But if it's something that's social, it requires a sense of agency from the person doing it. So, when you ask the question, would they just be like, okay, you have back pain, do a social prescription, or, it's less of like a direction, like a directive, or it's more of, there's a word called co-creative. So when you're meeting with a link worker, you're trying to come up with what's the best social prescription for you, based on your interests. And so the link worker is bringing you their insights on what's happening in the community. And it's something that is very focused on if you want to do it. So the doctor wouldn't necessarily say, here's back pain, do social prescription. They would say, there's this thing called social prescription that's this. Is this something that you might be interested in exploring? And
but they could prescribe it for things that weren't just mild mood disorders, and they could also prescribe it for like other physical ailments that the doctor knows there's a causal relationship between having like too little social stimulation and this, because a lot of mental things, stress especially, has immediate physical reactions. And as I don't know, I feel like this is a sort of gendered thing too, a little bit. Like as a dude, I feel like I'll be like, I have a pain in my neck before I realize that it's because I'm stressed. And so I might even go to the doctor and be like, my neck hurts, so fix my neck. And then they're like, tell me a little bit about like your day to day. And I'm like, well, I get up at 8:30 and I work until 10 p.m. every day on my computer. And they're like, well, I think I found the problem, So they can just say, they can kind of do that. It doesn't have to be like this patient come in and say, okay, so it's sort of it's a tool in their toolbox.
Yes. Totally.
And then they need that link worker to do it. Or do you think the American system, if we had this really start kind of full blown, would it have a similar kind of separate worker, or would this go on to like a case manager's list of things they could do, or do you think it would be a completely other person?
It's a great question. It could take a couple different forms. I think the reason why the doctors don't do it in the UK, and I think would be a pretty similar case in the US, is because you really can't do that co-production, that discovery of what's a good fit social prescription with you when you have a doctor's appointment that's already 10 minutes.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But in the US, I think some other outlets are, I think therapy is where we're seeing some traction, because they already probably could guess what a good social prescription, because therapists often know their patients. They have 50-minute meetings. There's also some exploration we're doing into employers, because the employer benefit space has really skyrocketed during COVID, because employers realize like, okay, most of our patients are experiencing mental health issues because of the pandemic. If we could provide this benefit, we'll get extra. So there's some possibility there. We are talking to some companies that the names of, that I won't share because I can. That builds even more hype for the
come to the conference.
Yeah. There will be a grand reveal at the conference. Who are exploring it, but I think that's it. I think it can. The community health workers in the U.S. are absolutely incredible. They're someone who could do social prescription. These workers are mostly working with people who are low resourced, and they're already giving prescriptions for food, housing assistance, legal assistance. This is kind of like a parallel movement that is probably 5 years ahead of ours, and there's a lot of robust research that is happening actually through Siren and UCSF, if anyone's interested. And those prescriptions are here. But I think in the States, it's likely a link worker role, or therapy, or employers, or incorporating it into community health workers. I think that there's also a possibility of physicians in their 10-minute meetings doing what is called signposting, where you're not necessarily having, I'm not discovering that Scott likes comedy and boogie boarding, but I have my one pager and we talk for 30 seconds and say, there's evidence that arts, nature, volunteering is good. Here's the stuff. You can reach out on your own. And, the research shows that doesn't stick, but I think it's central to providing an education for people that you can do this sort of stuff. Because it's kind of like what you're talking about, Adam, how like you have neck pain, but like it's not just that something's wrong with your neck. I think when you're like, I've gone through depression. You get caught in the same mental scripts and in the same routine, and you can become lethargic. And one of the reasons why social prescribing works and community activity works is because it's stimulation. Like, imagine if I wanted to exercise more and I'm depressed, like I could just like be like, oh, I'm going to put on a video. But like I know the thing that will actually get me out of bed is if someone knocks on my door and drags me out at 7 a.m. And then when I'm there's tons of positive reinforcement from everyone around you and high fives. And so like we can't see these things in isolation, and the stimulation to your cognition can get you thinking differently, can get you out of a funk, can get you there's research on nature that one of the hypotheses why nature is so beneficial for your health is because we live in these incredibly structured environments where there's right angles everywhere. But in nature, when you're literally wandering around a forest, you have to be highly aware because you're not routed in a particular direction. So it brings you into the present. And so I think it's interesting. Like it's impossible to measure the impacts of these things because every forest is different, every person's different, but still, like, I think in principle, a lot of the stuff makes intuitive sense, and it is exciting that researchers who are way smarter than I am at studying this stuff are finding compelling evidence, and it's catching the attention of the CDC. I mean, we had an article that actually the CDC referenced. That's huge in their newsletter.
Oh wow! So you wrote an article?
I didn't write an article.
Or someone in your troop.
It was a Time magazine. It was an article that
someone hopped out of the clown car.
Yeah,
typed it up
with a typewriter with a
back
1920s.
in.
Yeah.
Bring, bang.
This is really exciting to me because I also have dealt with depression before. And so the idea that you're not just like a one-time going, aha, I'm going to reach out to you once, but you're really building a whole system so that when a person dealing with that, or if or when they feel like venturing out, that system is there, and it's not like I missed the bus or I missed the one train, because you do run those scripts, and then you start telling yourself, you're like, oh well, I've missed my opportunity, so I might as well not care about anything, whatever. But if you have an open standing space where once you're ready to engage with it, it's there ready for you, that seems really exciting to me, and I think that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, you need an infrastructure, and often people just need a catalyst, right? Like I'll share a kind of a ridiculous story, but in high school, I went to Nike running camp in Vermont. So there's a bunch of like teenage JV cross country boys
runners
going to Vermont, and
you're putting on far too sultry of a voice for what you're describing. It's like the least sexy thing I can imagine. Then you're like, let me tell you about these cross-country teenage boys.
It's just like
what?
Sprinting cross-country or what? I don't. What goes on at a running camp? Okay.
So well,
you know what I'm going to tell you? I think it's going to be running.
Running.
So they brought in this motivational speaker, and he had spoken for like the Washington Nationals and stuff, and like exactly what you'd imagine. Imagine someone who like drank 3 cups of coffee and is literally like pacing across the stage yelling at you. And he goes, what's the hardest part about running? And then there's like
acid.
Yeah, stuff like that. The hill.
Yeah.
It's the finish line. It's all these people coming out with all these voices. He goes, no. He says, the hardest part about running is getting on your shoes and walking out the door.
Oh.
But I think it's true. Like,
yeah.
Like, if you're feeling depressed and you're in bed all day and you've got the same routine, you're in such a rut. And again, I want to kind of preface this that, like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. It's just a perspective.
Right.
Prefaces come at the beginning of things.
I
think you're epiloguing this.
I haven't made any claims. Scott, you said you'd edit it. Come on, man.
Come on. Put that at the beginning. Put the preface at the beginning.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Solutions from the Multiverse. I'm Scott, and no.
Very true. Very true. But I it's interesting because, like, there's so many volunteer opportunities, and often, like, most people, if they went and they actually helped someone and they were greeted with gratitude from all these people, it would be so good for them. But, like, it's so hard to get on your shoes and walk out the door. And I think that's what social prescribing does, because it's not just signposting you to an event. There's a link worker who you feel understands you, might shoot you a text message before or after checking in with you. And if there's an infrastructure where someone is greeting you, like we have in Cleveland, like we have in these other places, it's like, it's just the catalyst that we need. Because I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that there's so many lonely people. It's like, just connect with each other, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Good point.
Yeah,
but
right.
There's a little bit of startup cost to all this.
No, but I have a friend, and it's very much like you're saying. We can both get down and be like, even messaging on the internet and be like, man, I'm feeling down or whatever. But if we make a plan to hang out together or make a plan, then it gets both of us, it has a thing that we're accountable for something, and it's more likely to get both of us into a spot where we can roll out of that funk,
Yeah, I've been trying to, coming out of the pandemic, and San Francisco, there's still like, I've been to other parts of the country, and people have kind of been over the pandemic for like a year, but in San Francisco, for some reason, people like continue to do like a lot of masking and social distancing, and there's this iciness still. It's unfortunate. Anyways, I've been trying to like get out of that intentionally, and so recently I joined like a draw, like you go and draw once a week at this bar. I mean, it's a bar. We're not drinking really, but it's just like a nice chill place, and everyone's drawing, and it's been super fun, and I've already made like a couple friends, and I feel like, wow, yeah, if someone had really asked me like, oh, what do you really, not that I have also, like you guys said, I've also struggled with depression in the past, but I mean, pandemic, I think everybody needs it. Like everybody needs to like hit the gas and like accelerate out of this pandemic. And so this is like very timely, I think.
And I don't know if you have this experience, but like, sometimes if you meditate or something, I can just assume that you both do since we're in San Francisco. Sometimes you meditate and you come out of it and then you're like a little like dissociated. You're just like, for me, like after being in the pandemic, like when I started socializing, I was like, I felt like I like needed to get like off the training wheel. Like I was just like, oh, conversation, right?
It was
like,
so clunky, right?
Yeah.
For a while, you're just like, I forgot how to interact with humans. Same, yeah, for sure.
So for in my case, you have to know how to interact with humans before the pandemic to feel that way after. Continue.
You lost nothing.
I lost nothing.
You're like, I was born.
Everyone came and started acting like me. That's good. What? Okay, you're building a movement. I'm on board. Scott, I think, is probably on.
I'm on board.
Yeah, we're on board. So what about someone who's listening right now? Like, what should they do? Like, they can't like tell their doctor to start social prescribing. Doctor's going to be like, get the hell out of my office. I'm so busy, right? So what do they?
Don't you dare bring that up. Get out of my office.
I've been on WebMD for the last 10 hours. I have 16 cancers, and you should start social prescribing.
You need a different doctor. Right, that's what the response is.
No, that's not what the doctor says. That's what the patient
But
says.
it's interesting that you say, I mean, you're joking around.
Yeah.
My colleague, Kate Mulligan, who's really been driving the Canadian movement, and they've had some great adoption. She'll literally go on the radio shows and people will call their doctors and be like, this is great. And so if you're interested in this, I think one, if you're someone who you feel like would benefit from this, know that the only limitation is yourself in terms of going to engage in the arts, nature, volunteering. Of course, the infrastructure that you're mentioning, Scott, isn't there. So it is harder. But like, I think that this is what's amazing about this is that this is a new chapter of health that we need to internalize as a new tool in our own tool belt that we can use regardless of the health system. Is like the end game that I'm looking forward to is like, and our goal is 2035. And there's a reason for that, but is that by 2035, social prescribing will be made available to every American, and it'll be in the curriculum so that there's kids that when, it becomes default that when you're feeling down, there might be a lot of causes to that. There may not be an exclusive solution, but something you might want to try is do a creative project. Think what might be purposeful. Do that. Maybe give to someone, either volunteering or just your time.
You could use a national nurse hotline to do this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I can't manufacture my own antidepressant pills, but I could theoretically operate as my own link worker and identify those types of opportunities for myself, and even
do it for
in absent or for a friend. Yeah, but in absence of that infrastructure, like you're saying, you're not locked out of this. You could create your own and start doing it and reap the benefits, just like they do in places where it is a thing.
We can also do this for each other.
Yeah.
Right. So you can help, especially because a lot of this, we're kind of running out of time, so we don't have time, but I'm having this whole thought in my mind about like justice. So, like some people don't have the transportation, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the money to go, because these things implicitly have some cost. Right. And anyways, we don't really have time to get into all that. I'm sure there's a fantastic, I'm sure that's the whole dimension of the whole thing. But if we do have the resources, or we can help someone else. So your friend says, hey, I'm really bummed out. If we kind of, not force on them, but say like, oh, well, do you want, like, why don't we plan something fun to do? And now you're kind of acting like that link worker. It actually reminds me, man, I'm like name dropping like crazy. This is the professor in me. Aristotle, Descartes, now we're going to bring Freud into it. So Freud actually wanted psychotherapy to be something not only that experts did, because he wanted expert psychotherapists to do it, but he also wanted kind of everyone to know about psychotherapy and to be kind of doing light, not really deep psychotherapy, but light, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm sorry, like connecting and doing that kind of low level sort of psychotherapy with everyone all the time. And he thought that would actually make all of society less neurotic, like less depressed and less anxious and less neurotic. And so in a way, that's an opportunity as we build this before there's like a top-down infrastructure like they might have just kind of dropped in UK, we can do a build-up kind of social infrastructure.
Totally. And I'll reference it real quick since you mentioned equity and access. I think so doing these activities in some ways can be cheaper than pills.
Oh,
and it's I like to think about all this stuff as a supplement to what the doctor's already telling you to do. It's definitely not a replacement, but like you can do creative work with a pen and paper. You can like call someone and support them but I think in terms of like having it be accessible, we are working on an app that will be coming out soon that you can search by zip code, and it pulls from meetup.com. It pulls from a lot of events. So it's kind of trying to aggregate the arts, nature, volunteering opportunities in your local area, in your zip code. But, to get back to your original question about like, how does this happen in the States? There's the personal part that we've been discussing, but we're also trying to aggregate resources in a community of practitioners. We actually have our first meeting of community of practitioners. There's going to be about a dozen of people who have already said yes. So I just sent out the invites today, October 4th. But you can go to SocialPrescribingUSA.com. There's a sign up. That's where like we're going to house all the information. I think what's amazing about the UK's movement and what we're trying to do here is that like any clinic can do it. You just have to, it's just hard work to make these connections. But the more that, the structure of our newsletter is that it's going to have like a part that's called insights and shout outs, which is basically, I'm going to collect the insights from practitioners and it's just going to be a bullet point list of like, here are the new insights about effectiveness in implementing this. And so what I said before about the New York City Nature Department, like being like, maybe we should staff someone, like that's a really nice insight for the rest of the movement. So you can imagine this
kind of a watershed,
watershed
for information.
Totally.
Yeah.
Wow. And people can
social prescribing
USA.
SocialPrescribingUSA.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where people can go and sign up for that newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay. How else can people get in touch with you or like connect with you in other spheres? What are your favorite social type arenas to play in, I guess?
So I am at Twitter at DFMorse23. Yes, that's correct. DFMORSE23. I'm not on Twitter too often, but you can email me too at socialprescribingusa@gmail.com.
Cool.
So there we go.
That's
SocialPrescribingUSA.com and SocialPrescribingUSA@gmail.com.
I also own Cleveland clownvan.com. So we kind of have a shadow movement.
Okay. Whoa.
That most of this is actually just to get leads for that other movement.
I feel like
strange. All of your social prescriptions involve people using clown cars in Cleveland. It's I'm seeing a connection now.
I think one thing people should be socially prescribed to do is start podcasts. This could be a fun thing.
No more competition.
Okay, you're right.
We're the last one. Close the door. No more podcasts.
What would you do to advance this movement? I mean, Adam,
I'm honestly thinking for
a couple of years.
That's true. The healthcare stuff is going to be, I would say, not a growth area. I think it's just like the UK. You said it's going to come from the people. Then the people are going to like be pressuring their medical professionals and medical industry people to be adopting this. It's not going to come the other way.
And why so? Just because
bureaucratic. They're just bureaucratic, and they're very focused on other things. Like my whole family's doctors. They're focused on the next research paper that comes out about the next drug or about the next. They're not. Also, they have a very strong bias thinking. They have a very pejorative or sort of jaded view of the American patient. Like, hey, I could be telling this patient to like take a walk every day, and I wouldn't have to give them their blood pressure medication, but I'm never going to get them to go on a walk every day. Here's your statin. You know, like they just throw the pills. And so what you're bringing is a real optimism about the ability for patients to actually take that sort of advice and do it. It has a lot to do with this link worker, has a lot to do with this co-creation idea, which like the doctor's not capable, really. Oh, they're capable, but I mean, they don't have time to do it. So I like this. I think it is. When you first told me about it, I was like, doctors are never going to do that. But when you explain the link worker thing, that makes me think, no, this is something that really could happen. What I think a hotline is actually a great idea. Like if you just had a hotline and anybody could just call it, and then you had people who it would route to their phones, and they were all volunteers. And then when someone called that number, they would pick up, and it would just be a social prescribing expert that could talk to you, and then they could either. If it was a clinician, then you'd train the clinician in social prescribing. If it's a person, you just say, what's your zip code? And you like help them decide. You like act as that link worker in the moment. Like that could be really powerful actually. And then people would have this transformative experience of having been on the phone with a real person. And then they go, wow, that's a real thing. And then they go with the rest of their, you know.
And you could have a different number that is like for social prescribing emergencies. That goes to like a really prominent red phone where the top social prescriber grabs it and they're like, run down and volunteer at a farmer's market right now.
Slam. Yeah.
They fix it and save the day.
Oh, we need a James Bond.
Yeah. And then something like across the chasm thing is what I'd look for too. Because you're kind of doing your early adopters, your innovators. You need to think of a way that it gets like on the front page of the New York Times or you know, someone's life is saved. It's kind of like, remember when you guys probably remember this, but Al Gore's son got a speeding ticket in a Prius. Get it? Like, do you see how the whole point is everyone thinks Priuses are like weak, and so they wouldn't buy them because they're just like weak, like good for the environment cars. But if someone gets a speeding ticket in it, then it's like, oh, it can go fast, right? So it kind of is like this way where it kind of gets through the filter and changes people's mind. Yeah, this was like 20 years ago. But anyway, so something that like social prescribing saved this woman's life because she was out volunteering and like her house burned down. No, I don't know, but somehow where it like, because it doesn't really save your life in a way that you're pulling someone from a burning car. It saves your life in this very gradual sort of way where it extends your life and improves your life. But for people to put on the front page of the New York Times, it needs to be like pull the baby from the burning building. So how do you present it in that way? You know,
but thinking back to when you were saying this was getting popularized in the UK, I am aware of them just recently creating a minister of loneliness. Like they have a bunch of ministers for different departments, for minister of defense or whatever.
Very Harry Potter.
But they made a minister. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what they were using. That's
he wears a long black cloak.
And we need someone like that who can spearhead.
We'd call it a czar.
A
czar,
a loneliness czar.
Yeah, isn't that what they call it in government in America?
I think they do, but
that's true.
It sounds very.
We could just call him Rasputin. I think Rasputin was the loneliness czar. So wait, what do you mean? Our government should have an official person, or his movement should have a person they like elect and call that, or something? Or
just someone who's advocating for it. Like sometimes they'll put a person in charge of like physical fitness for the country or whatever, like a figurehead of some sort.
That's a good idea.
But I don't know. I just bringing awareness to the situation feels like a huge step in getting adoption widespread.
Well, there's awareness in a couple ways. There's awareness in like a sort of PR, like get the word out sort of way. But I think, I'm not sure if it was the Minister of Loneliness or it was a different department, but part of that initiative was they gave out, I think it might have been like 30 million pounds in grants, like micro grants for projects that nonprofits did to address loneliness. And it was things like we have a community center, we wanted to get buy a bunch of games and like have like 10 pizza nights and for $1,000. And there was this initiative that was I forget what they called it, friendly benches, which is these parks put a public bench and it says this is a friendly bench, which means if you're on it, it's assumed that you're open to chat with people.
Talking to the stranger next to you isn't a rude thing anymore. It's kind of like, I'm okay with that. I think this sounds fantastic. I am actually very excited and
Yeah, I love
jealous
that.
of the British system that they have access to this.
Yeah.
So I'm on board. I'm way into it. I'm
Yeah,
really happy
me
you
too.
brought this to us today, Dan.
Yeah,
It's
me
fantastic.
too. This is awesome. Definitely the loneliness, and there's like the crisis of meaning as well. I feel is tied into this same thing. There's a lot tied into this: health outcomes, diseases of despair, getting out of the pandemic. There's so much that's so important right now with this. I really hope this movement takes off, and hope we can participate more.
Well, and people can get in touch with Dan through his Twitter or through
SocialPrescribingUSA at gmail.com.
SocialPrescribingUSA at gmail.com.
I just go into clowncars.
People can get in touch with
dot
Adam on
Cleveland.
Twitter at AJ Braus.
AJ Braus. Yep, AJ
And
Braus.
people can hit me up at Scott Maupin, SCOTMAUPIN. We'd love to hear from you.
Let's
anything
talk
you
about
got to
social
share.
prescribing. Yeah. Awesome.
This has been
Keep the
fantastic.
conversation
having me on,
going
Dan.
online. Yeah,
Thanks
Dan.
everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Dan, for joining us and bringing us this new solution. I'm excited. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
Thanks
See
for
you,
having
See you
me
next
on.
time.
see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey there. Thanks for listening to that episode of Solutions from the Multiverse.
Yeah, we're back with a little after roll. Hello.
Hey, after roll. Roll that after roll. So basically, we want you to subscribe
Yeah.
and rate and review and tell someone, like, take your favorite solution and send it to someone who you think it would like blow their mind to hear it.
Yeah, we love making the show. We're proud of it, and we're excited. We want other people to show. We know that the main way people find podcasts is word of mouth. I know that's true for me. I listen to my friends who also listen to podcasts tell me about ones, and I go, okay, I'm cluing into that. So we want to be part of that chain.
So thanks for being a part of Solutions.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.